So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're viewing from. I'm Laura Thompson with TAAN TV, the African American Network, where we have a local feel with a global reach. And I'm here with the phenomenal, fabulous, amazing, she's an amazing woman with many layers, Ms. Renee Watson. And we're here today to talk about Women's Equality Day. And so I couldn't think of a better person to reach out to than Renee Watson. She just recently won an award for Woman of the Year, I think, the 30 top women in Texas. Was that what that
The
award was
top
about?
30 women of influence of the state of Texas for 2026.
Yeah, yeah. And so what better person to bring on to talk about women's equality? And so she's a groundbreaker. She's done a lot of things, and she's been doing a lot of great things for our community since she was a teenager. And so, she knows where, all the dead bodies are. She knows, where, all of the great stories and the fight. She's an advocate for women and small businesses. So, how you doing, Renee?
I'm doing great. It's a great opportunity. I'm glad that I had an opportunity to share because today is a very significant day in our history throughout the United States.
Wow. And it's, I'm ashamed to say that this is the first uh, year that I've heard of Women's Equality Day. I would have been doing something, for years and years, but I just didn't know. But I knew you knew. And
Oh,
so,
yeah. We keep up with all of those in the struggle for civil rights, where it
right.
was women, where it was colored folks back then, Negroes, African Americans now, and then what's happening even in today's time with affirmative action, diversity, DEI, and all of those terms that we use. So yeah, it's been a long struggle in the suffrage movement when we talk about recognizing women.
Wow. So if you look back, when was kind of the first era that you started advocating for women?
Probably when I was working in the Texas Senate back in the mid '80s, because I first started working with women-owned businesses, and then a lot of the nonprofits we didn't have a lot of young girls, so we started asking the question because today it's the Boys and Girls Club, but when we was growing up it was just the Boys Club, and then there's Girl Scouts we were part of, and then there was the Boy Scouts, and then there's been some conversations about intramural sports, because when we were growing up, it was half court for girls. It wasn't full. There was no WNBA. It was just NBA,
Hmm.
and it's a lot of different industries, sports, athletics. So growing up and seeing that, and having some great leaders, which we can talk about throughout the state of Texas, that were very inspirational in my life and in my career.
Wow. So what do you think attributed to the women's movement, so to speak? Where did you start seeing women incorporated into um, everyday life or things that men or boys only had an opportunity to do?
Well, if when a student of history looking at back in the 1970s, when the in this put it like this in the 60s during the civil rights movement, we had a lot of women marching with Dr. King, of all races, color, and creed, and then they still couldn't vote. So
Hmm.
then what happens next in the 70s? The suffrage movement, women strike for equality. Yeah, the 73, the battles over the Equal Rights Amendment. So there was a lot of struggles, a lot of marching on the national level. But then we had in the early 80s some, when I look at the heroes and the sheroes in the 90s and the 80s, everybody knows Barbara Jordan and all
Hmm.
the things she did in her incredible work in the U.S. Congress. And some of you don't know that. You might have to look her up. But then there was Governor Ann Richards that got in office in the early 90s. And the things that she did and how she brought a lot of women with her administration to the state house in the state of Texas.
Wow. So in your lifetime too, you've had an opportunity to kind of meet or be in the presence or rub shoulders with some of these women. So can you tell us about some of those experiences?
Well, actually, as a public administrator, I actually got to work with them, not just do a drive-by, have a handshake, be at a parade, but actually looking in, being on the inside as a public servant. When Governor Richards was in office, I was working for a state agency coming out of college. Then we had because of her, we have MLK Holiday. She initiated that. I was there at the governor's mansion when she signed that bill, along with several other members out of our community. Texas was the 49th state to actually adopt a King holiday, even though the national movement under Ronald Reagan was in 1987. The state of Texas didn't come on board until 1991. And then we had a signing ceremony at the Antioch Missionary Baptist Church on Juneteenth. So it was a great experience being to see women in leadership, and then being a public servant, actually being in the offices. Karen Jones Conley was a great leader as a state representative. She was followed by Ruth Jones McClendon. May she rest in peace, because she did a lot of things with the state legislature. And now Barbara Gervin Hawkins serves in that seat for the East Side for the state legislature.
Wow. So there's been a lot of women in the state house
At least from our district, yes.
From San Antonio. Wow.
Because G.J. Sutton had it first, and then when he passed, Lunell Sutton, his wife, served for many, many years. And then we've had a legacy of women leaders coming out of District 120 for the state house. On the Senate side, it's only been men, but maybe one day we'll get a woman that's serving in the Senate for the state of Texas from East Side San Antonio.
Wow. So let's fast forward to now in terms of women's equality and women's rights. Have things changed, or because I know there was a lot of traction, in the last several decades, as women's rights. But how do you view women's rights?
Well, I see a lot of success with women-owned businesses, because for many, many years, a woman couldn't get a loan to finance her own business unless her husband signed for it. In many, as you know, in many of our communities, we have absentee fathers, and a lot of women were raising their own families. So they were going to work, but they couldn't become entrepreneurs because the laws at the bank, not only were we redlined in our communities, we were redlined by household. So those rules have changed, and now we take it for granted, because as long as you got good credit, you usually can get a good financing for a business. So we see a lot of women of color that are very successful business owners and have 200, 300, sometimes 1,000 employees, and we get to celebrate that today. But that struggle is still very real when it comes to getting contracts, whether they're government contracts, private sector, or any other types of, especially in this economy today.
Wow. So can you name a few? I know this is Women's Equality Day, but can you name some of the things that may be deemed unequal or as an inequality as far as women are concerned?
Well, one of the things we're concerned about right now is still in the voting rights and how we vote and who votes, because the absentee vote or the pre-voting period has always been convenient for women, especially if they had children, because you can early vote, you didn't have to stand in line and worry about babysitting. So access to the ballot is still some of the things we watch. Bexar County does a fantastic job through the elections department. It's actually won by a woman now, and prior to her administration, Jacqueline Callahan did an excellent job with the administration of Bexar County elections. But that's not the same all over the state of Texas. And when we look at how do we ensure that women's voices are heard, it's always through the ballot box and every other voices that are heard. The League of Women Voters is a great nonpartisan organization that helps to educate women and all others, but mostly educate young women on why it's so critical for everyone to vote in every election, not just a presidential election, not just an off-year gubernatorial election, but every election, whether school board, river authority, it's so many elections these days, the city council, just to make sure that your voice is heard.
Wow. So I had an opportunity to interview you earlier this year for the MLK story.
Oh yeah.
And so there's layers and layers and layers to Renee Watson. that a lot of people don't know. And so you started off like when you were in middle school, probably uh, participating in civil rights, which as a female, that was part of the women's rights struggle too, because you were coming through the ranks.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
so what are some of the struggles that you face personally? It doesn't seem like it because Renee, what
Well,
everything.
that's why I got that training, because see, there was a few good women in middle school, but there was some in elementary. Because
Wow.
at Gates Elementary School, my pen pal was Congressman Henry B. Gonzalez. So he would come to our classroom once a month on Fridays and talk to us about what was happening in Washington. And then you went home at night and you saw him on the news where he was raising Cain or raising hell with somebody throughout the community on being communist and all of those issues that were back during that time. So I got to see that, and then having so many activists, whether it was SNCC or some of the other groups with John Sanders, Mario Salas, T.C. Calvert, and Rick Green, I started following them around. I was the only young girl following them around to see what is this community organizing, what are they doing, how do they do logistics for marches, how do we do stand-ins, what is it that is making their voices so great when I don't see any women. And then I started seeing a few women like Barbara and a couple of other girls that would come into those organizations. And then we started seeing Lunell Sutton and the things that she was doing from a legislative standpoint. So wrapping all of that up together made me have a desire to become a public servant and work on the inside of public administration.
Wow. So why do you think that it's the I guess the way society is structured, or the political arena or business arena is structured, sometimes it seems like um, women kind of get left behind in certain areas, or silenced or dismissed. So, how does a woman kind of funnel through that type of environment?
Well, one of the things, there's some great leadership training that these women organizations do across the country. And we have a few here when you look at what is that leadership take. Because sometimes you have to go in and break down some walls and what we call busting glass ceilings. And you have to have the courage to be able to do that. And you have to take the criticism and being ostracized many times in order for you to have a breakthrough. Because good things take time, they don't happen overnight. And a lot of women may not have time to invest because they have so many other responsibilities, like family, like caring for their parents or their children or grandchildren. So when you say, well, how do you prioritize to be committed to something? It's a lot of decisions that go into that process. And then what is your circle? And do you even have a circle of friends or influencer that can help? When I look at a lot of women-owned businesses, there's always this, I guess you can say, before you walk in, people assume that you have a fraud because you don't own the business, your husband does.
Mm-hmm.
But it's so many women that actually have a husband, but they actually have a business as well, and they're in charge of that business. They make all the decisions for that business. But to be dismissed because so many other businesses, and we all acknowledge there is fraud, there is um, misuse and corruption in some of these processes. But don't prejudge someone to automatically label them with that. Because when they come in, they should be treated just like everyone else. And we should ensure non-discrimination and making sure everyone has a fair shot and a fair chance.
So earlier this year, DEI was dismantled. How do you think that affected women-owned businesses or women in the workforce?
Well, first of all, when you say DEI, that means that you're branding something that doesn't exist. We have to make sure we say those words: diversity, equity, and inclusion. That will never be dismantled. How we administer those programs has been changed. Or in some organizations, you can say it has been dismantled. But the commitment to ensure non-discrimination, to ensure we have diversity, whether it's in the workforce, in the employment field, or in contracting, We have equality, making sure that everyone has a fair shot at what they're trying to do. And inclusion, because everyone should be included, no matter who you love, no matter where you come from, no matter the color of your skin or anything else. You should have a fair shot as being a part of it. We've gone through this. This is not the first time we've had changes to programs. Affirmative action started 50 years ago. The first disparity study for the state of Texas was done in 1985. We're still doing disparity studies. We're still showing the difference between the utilization and availability. But are you really documenting discrimination? And that's where the controversy is, because some folks feel like they're left out. And it's a variety of races that feel left out. When you go to different cities, the majority population sometimes gets all of the contracts, whether they're minority or non-minority contractors, because of the political aspect in the policy. We're trying to level the playing field, but we've been trying to do that for 50 years. That's what Dr. King was talking about, the content of our character, not the color of our skin. So how do you make that happen, not only in housing, where you can live, not only in financing, how can you get a loan? A lot goes to that. But we call it, the 3 C's: character, character, character. What are you presenting in each one that's being treated as an individual? And we hope everyone inside in those decision makers are looking at it the same way.
Wow. So I know back in the day, when the women's movement was really prevalent and prominent out there, they had a commercial, Virginia Slim's commercial, that says, we come a long way, baby.
Yeah.
And so do you think that since that time, we've come even further as women?
Well, you can say that slogan still applies. We have come a long way, baby, but we still have a long way to go. But the question is, where you're trying to go? What are you trying to do? Because not everyone is still in that movement. Some folks have achieved and moved on. Some of those leaders have moved on. They're not with us anymore. So who in the next generation is taking up that mantle of leadership? And then how are we mentoring them to make sure that those policies or those rules are equal for everybody? Because as women, we need to make sure we're mentoring young women. And how are we making sure that they don't have to make the same mistake, but they can stand on your shoulders to get to the next level?
Wow. So what is the significance of Women's Equality Day?
It's for us to take time to remember those who have gone before us, to realize the significant work every one of us are doing, and preparing the next generation for what they're going to be tasked with and their responsibility. Because each generation says their responsibilities, or thinks their responsibility is greater than the next generation. But when you look at the outside influence, so we were dealing with a lot of folks, and our issues were different. Today's issues are technology they're fighting, and AI, because many of them can't get jobs because you're fighting the technology for some of those careers that they thought they were going to school with or being trained in the communities with, and there's no replacement for everyone. So we have to step back and say, in this time, how are we helping those young folks to transition?
Wow. And so this is the African American Network. So I'm going to ask African American specific question about women. And so how do you feel that African Americans rank in terms of business and housing affordability, and, all of the things in the political realm as far as voting? How do you see us ranking in terms of those specific areas?
Well, I always say that's a broad question, and we have to talk about it in the marketplace. Because if me and you were in Atlanta, we were having that conversation, our conversation would be different than the conversation we're having in San Antonio. Because it's based on policy, persuasion, and who are your politics out there, and what is your community, and how great of the voice is. What are your social organizations? We had a few back in the 70s and 80s. Many of those organizations have gone silent. And some of them they just meet, and we're not sure what they do. And then you have the Divine Nine they have a presence, but if you were in a other type of community, they have a lot of presence. So if we want to talk as we focus on San Antonio, the creation of the businesses are very few, because the reasons why in the types of industries have always been limited to the amount of capital that you have. And it's not really the access to capital, it's access to ideas and making things happen. Because anyone who has a good idea and can make things happen and have character, I've seen them, no matter what color their skin is, get financed. And I've been doing this job 26 years here at Bear County, focusing on small business.
Wow. So, do you think that in Bear County there's equal opportunity for women that kind of are ready to go into business or ready to move up in a corporation? Do you think there's equal opportunity?
So there's always a question about equality versus inclusivity versus what are you doing to make that happen? Because if you're sitting on the sideline just because you got certified, then you done already lost the race.
Right.
Because you looking at what are you presenting, what is your code, what do you sell, what is your access to marketplace, what is the cost, how are you benefiting from your profit, how are you reinvesting in your business? Because not everything that you sell as an individual is the best price if you have these big guys going up against you.
Mhm.
So if you're a small marketing firm and you have a large marketing firm, what is the ROI and the benefit for who's procuring that service? They're usually going to go with that larger firm because it costs less. But it depends. There's always a depends on your mobilization, your ability to provide good customer service, be responsive. You may win whatever you're pursuing.
Mhm. Wow. So this is a great conversation. I'm glad I had an opportunity to catch up with you
Absolutely.
because you're right in the thick of things, right in the midst of all of the things that are going on that connects businesses to contracts and business opportunities. And you've been in the women's movement because the women's movement is civil rights as well. So
Absolutely. It's all civil rights.
yeah, so you've been in that arena for a very long time, and so
Yeah.
better person to come and talk to us for a few minutes about Women's Equality Day and really break it down and make it objective where people can realize that women's equality comes from the things that the steps that we take and the initiative that we take as individual women to make things happen in our lives and to make things happen in the business world.
Absolutely. And that's it's not just in business, but in daily life. Because if you start, you may start, you may fall down, you may make some mistakes, but keep getting up because one day you may be successful in something that you started. Because you're going to finish strong. We
Right.
always tell folks that. I also have a partnership with the Texas Department of Criminal Justice in the women's unit because those even in our community who are formerly incarcerated, returning to our community, need support and resources because sometimes they can't get a job, but they can become an entrepreneur. And if we have individuals like that, male or female, because we are in the business of not just reincarceration, right? Because we want people out of our jobs. We want rehabilitation, but we also want to be able to provide services to anyone in our community who has a desire and a heart to change their lives.
Wow. Well, we got the right one. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I did want you to stop by and give us your perspective, uh, you know, based on your experience and knowledge and, just being a woman. And congratulations
Absolutely.
for all of the honors. I'm like, every year I count, uh,
That's right.
Renee is, moving and shaking. And if you have an opportunity to stop by the Small Business Development Center over in Perrin Vital, where she's at the helm of it, she might show you her museum.
Well, the Lord has blessed us to be able to do a lot of things, impact a lot of lives, and we like to share those stories.
Wow. So thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Tuned into TAAN TV, the African American Network, where you have a local feel and a global reach. And thank you. I appreciate hanging out with you and look forward to talking to you some more before the end of the year.